with a little trick, clean the lens, and you've instantly got a clearer picture. And, well, when I saw, I've got a bit of the COVID weeping, dropping everyone into breakout here. Hello everyone. Hi, welcome. I'm Yola and this is the Be Video Confidence Show. And it's a show where we talk about video strategy and business. And this is my first international show with Nadine Drummond from Jamaica. Welcome, Nadine.
Hey, good morning. Good morning for me and good afternoon to you. Hi, Jola, and hi, audience. How's everybody doing?
Oh, it's great. And it's not sunny London.
Oh, it's wonderful here. I actually have a beach view. So I'm not sorry. As you can see, it's party central because I've got Chardonnay here, Cabernet here, and Zinfandel there, and I have glasses all around me.
Oh, fantastic. Well done finding a really good signal. So thank you. Thank you for really taking a lot of effort to be here today. Thank you. So let me introduce our guest, Nadine Drummond. She's a communications and engagement consultant for the UN Human Rights Regional Office of Southern Africa. So that's 14 countries. Is that right?
It's 14 countries in Southern Africa, which is actually about a quarter, say a third of Africa.
Wow.
And as you know, Africa is the largest continent in the world.
Yeah, wow, fantastic. And you're there raising the visibility of organizations through media, communications, and digital engagement strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And you're making millions of dollars in that for people, for countries.
Yes. Not for me, but yes, for organizations, because we compete for attention, media attention. And when we have that media attention, we're able to garner more resources for the crises that we work on. So not all Southern African countries are in crises, but human rights are I believe, always at risk. Yeah. So we have to be vigilant and diligent, making sure that we're protecting them, but also monitoring governments to limit the chances of abuse, which is what can happen.
My God, that's really, really important work. And you instigate and develop strategies for change policies.
Yes, so this is just general campaigning, and this is something that's always happened around the world. Human beings have always got together, a small group of people, and agitated for change. And over a period of time, that group gets larger and larger and larger. They start attracting funding or benefactors, and they're able to influence and pinpoint policies that make a difference. So we can see that now more broadly in a climate crisis or climate change context, in that you have small groups of people all over the world that are agitating and pressuring governments and corporations for change. So in a human rights perspective, it manifests in a slightly different way. It's making sure that our laws are protected. It's making sure people know the mechanisms that exist to help protect them. But it works slightly differently, because in some countries you can't go and protest because you disappear or you get killed. So there has to be other ways in which people can organize to pressure their governments or their leaders, because not as we know are democracies, for change, perhaps without dying or without disappearing. So where human rights work comes in, and the work that is done in Southern Africa, in parts of the Middle East, and in parts of Europe, is to try and offer protections that we can't see, that we may not even know exist, to those people. And then when you build a strategy, you first of all, you have to know who your audience is, right? Because you don't know, you need to know who you're talking to, right? You need to know what your end goal is. So once you know who your audience is, who your stakeholders are, and you know what your end goal is, then you can build a strategy to meet that goal. So you need to have your audience, your objectives, your audience, and then you can build a strategy to meet that goal. So really all the strategy is a solution. It's a solution to a problem. It's a bit more complicated, but it's
Yeah,
generally
yeah, yeah. But no, I get that, because that really does follow through. You know, you're talking to the right audience. I mean, I teach data visualization, and one of the things about data visualization is everyone's like, oh, what's storytelling? What is storytelling? And is it exactly that? It's about knowing basically what the facts are, what the data is, but it's knowing who you're talking to and talking to them and what the end goal is. And that is just, it's a foundation of storytelling, it's a foundation of strategy, and that is the way that you really get through to people.
But you know, Jola, not everybody realizes that. People, most people don't actually understand the power of storytelling, and even if they do, they don't actually know how to tell a story, and they think it's easier than it is, and they don't realize that it's not just about detail. You have story arcs, you can be really technical, for instance. So when I was in Yemen, I knew that Yemen's the most diverse Arab country, where a third of the population look like me, right? And when that was when my work really started to go viral. So I realized that when most people were in the country doing my job, they would select families or children to tell beneficiary or participant stories that look like them, and most of those people were white. Now, I was shocked that Yemen was so diverse, and by that time, I'd been in Doha. Goodness, I'm so sorry. I had a situation. I'd been in Doha for about 7 years, and Arabs there look different. They're more of what people imagine to be traditional looking Arabs. And so, from my perspective, I started showcasing families that looked like me, and it wasn't unconscious, it was a deliberate bias. And what happened was I taught the audience something new. They thought all Arabs looked the same. They didn't realize you had African Arabs or Black Arabs or hybrids, kind of Arab-African mixes, right? And so when I was telling stories, people were engaging more because I was teaching them something new. I was teaching them that this is a really diverse place. I was teaching them that this isn't about necessarily the color of one's skin. It's just about being an unfortunate person. Well, you're not an unfortunate person, being in an unfortunate circumstance and not being able to do very much about it. Because if your governments are going to war and you have renegade groups in your country, I mean, if you're a civilian, there's absolutely nothing you can do. So that's just one example of being really deliberate in your storytelling. And I think that part of the challenge in digital or any type of communication strategy is people don't realize the nuances. And I think sometimes the data isn't even accurate because I mean, the data is only as good as the population that you're sampling, right? And if the population are variations of people like you, then the information is going to be limited. So I think that when you're storytelling, you need to have a diverse bunch. So for instance, my team is in Pretoria. I'm in the UK. I'm not African in a traditional sense. And I knew nothing about South Africa. I had to learn, and I learned some hard lessons. I had to learn about Southern Africa, the different languages, the different cultures, and learning how not to offend people by my own gaze. Because despite being a Black person, I still have a Western gaze. It might not necessarily be a white gaze, but it's still Western. So once I think you understand all of these nuances within yourself and you understand the biases that you're bringing to your work in terms of storytelling or finding a strategic communication solution in order to fundraise money for an organization, then you can really knuckle down on the types of stories you're going to tell, and you can strategically pinpoint your audience and influence their behavior based on their biases.
Yeah. So that's context as well, giving context to the data that you've gathered or the information that you've got. If you understand the context, without the context, these are just numbers, these are just facts. But if you understand the context of where that's come from, where that's going, and who your audience are, then I totally agree with you that you really start engaging with them.
No, I mean completely, but it's an academic, for me, I treat it like an academic exercise. So of course it's creative. I'm quite a creative person, and that's natural for me. So that's not really what I feel like I need to work on. Other people may disagree, I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's an academic exercise because at first I need to understand my audience. I need to understand the context and the analysis around that. Then I look at the biases that I'm aware of that I have and how that can affect the way we'll fundraise money. So one of the biggest things at the moment is poverty porn. So when we're working in the INGO sector or any crisis communications sector, you have a savior complex or a white savior complex, and you have these awful pictures of, I mean, even if we look at the most recent visit to Jamaica of
Prince William.
William and Kate,
Mm.
some of the optics were horrendous. And technically, they weren't really responsible for their optics, but their communications team was. And they suffered as a result. So even though it's a slightly different campaign, they were still on a campaign. And that's a failed optics without realizing or understanding bias.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how things like that happen. And so in storytelling, to be successful in storytelling, I think that you have to understand your biases, and that's also really important for video as well.
Yeah, yeah. When I was making TV commercials, and this is, we're at the other end of the spectrum. We're selling now, making for cleaning products. I learned everything about the cleaning product. I
Mummy,
learned.
turn it off. Are you crazy?
You
I'm
live
sorry. I'm here
filmmaker.
with my mum, and I turned off my mum's phone, and she just turned it back on again. I'm so sorry, audience. I don't think my mum doesn't really understand yet that this is a live stream. So I'm really sorry. So now my mum's phone's turned off.
Great. So we're making these information, all the kind of social videos around the commercial. So with the commercial, I learned everything about the product, how people used it, and there were people who were not like me. They were using a product that I didn't use, but I studied it. I took it home. I used it. I studied all the feedback, how people used it, what they wanted it for. And then only then could I start creating videos and scripts and storylines. And then we'd actually be on the shoot and the client would say, actually, Yola, you know more about this than we do. Because I knew this is how they use it. These are the problems that they have. This is how they solve the problem right now. So if I tell them, actually, this will solve your problem better, I know you're using that, I can connect more. And so that is the beauty of storytelling, whether it's a commercial to sell a product or it's storytelling it's just about connecting with people and making stuff so that people engage with it and convert, this conversion to start engaging with you. And I love it too. I love it too. I love that kind of all the research. And I think people don't realize that. They think, oh, you're a filmmaker, you're a video maker, you're just creative. There's just so much more strategy in it that we have to do.
I mean, I think so. With video, what's really important is that you gain 4 main benefits. You have an increase in your sales. So in the work that I do, I think about it as sales, even though no one's buying anything because it's a more broadly charitable organization. There are other competing human rights organizations in Southern Africa. As we know, apartheid occurred or happened in many countries in Southern Africa, in South Africa, but that kind of political system or attitude or white kind of supremacist system was dominant for the region. So most human rights work actually emanated there. So as a result of that, there's lots of competing agencies. And just because it's the UN doesn't mean everybody's going to go to the UN. So I treat my work like sales. So when I'm thinking about how to communicate with the audience, to teach them about human rights without offending governments, I'm thinking about how I can do that more effectively so that our stakeholders which are millions of people across Africa that have access to the internet, will engage in our services first, will use our resources first, because most of the resources are free. But even if they're free, you need to have more people using your resources so that you can attract more money in order to provide better resources and provide them more broadly. In addition to that, using video raises more traffic. Of course, it raises brand awareness. And then what you were saying earlier is about the conversions. That's where it comes in. So people need not think about storytelling as some just creative endeavor. I mean, yes, it is. That's one facet of it, but it's like a kaleidoscope. That's only one part of it, because you can tell the most brilliant story. And if you haven't multi-purpose the story, so if you might not have a blog post and you don't have, you haven't maybe created an Instagram reel, or you haven't used any kind of video, that story will not appear really at number 1 or number 2 in Google searches, because any story that has a video is 57% more likely to appear in a first or second Google search. So it's not really about the quality of your content in the same way as it was before. So as you know, with the work that you do, Jola, in data visualizations, it's more scientific than that. You need to understand the science. It almost doesn't matter how good your story is.
Yeah. And understand things like the arc, the story arc.
Yes.
You know, when I discovered story arc, I was like, oh, well, that's easy. I get it now. And having that story arc is so important. Or just, it's so human. You know, we want to know what it was like, what was the conflict, and we want to know what the resolution is and how to achieve that, and that feeling. And that just drives all of us. And it just unlocked everything for me.
It does. There's no comparison. And there's a delicate, obviously there's no comparison, but there's a delicate balance. So what we see now is we see lots of hero stories, which is fine, but some of them are just so unbelievable. It's like, come on, give me a break. It has to be very nuanced. So, I mean, if you look at a lot of storytelling online now, you have one big arc, then you come down. And successful stories actually flow like a wave.
Yeah.
They move in and out like the sea. So when you do create stories and you're using video or moving images and sound, it's not just the picture, right? It's the sound and how the sound works with that, because they work in conjunction. And this is one of the most powerful lessons I learned as a TV news producer and reporter, is that your sound is just as powerful as your video, and they have to work in conjunction with each other to be really successful.
Yeah.
And your sound is what carries your video or your moving pictures along, whether that sound is natural sound, the ringing of a bell, the firing of a gun, the barking of a dog, the crying of a baby, or whether or not it's oral sound, whatever it is that the subject of your stories or story is saying. And then on from that, it's music, background music. It can be meditative music. It can be the type of intense music that we all remember from that movie Jaws.
Right?
Yeah. And when you hear that now, you start looking up.
It's coming.
So it's a pair of sounds. It's a combination of things. And just because somebody can do comms or somebody can do PR, that does not mean they know how to tell stories. And this is a mistake that all businesses make, or all brands make, until they really understand what storytelling is and how to be successful at storytelling.
Yeah. Well, it's true. If you got video with bad pictures, you'll still watch it because you can hear what's going on. If you're watching a video with bad audio, you're like, oh, just turn it off. It's just really annoying me. It is so important, and it's so overlooked. You know, it's also not enough to just put a track down. You know, it's think about it. And you're right. It's these little details, that little signifiers that really connect with people. That audio visual connection. It's just so powerful. Such an important part of storytelling. You know, I got totally addicted into instead of taking a photo of a beautiful flower, because I go for walks really early in the morning with my dogs, and sometimes it's just so beautiful. And I was taking a photo and I was thinking, but I'm missing out all this 360 experience of being here and the sound of the birds around me. So I started to take 40 seconds little films and no audio other than what was around me. Now, iPhones are just brilliant because they're just so amazing. And when I watch back those videos that I've done, I've got videos where I took a picture of this beautiful, took a little video of a beautiful flower, and behind me somebody was walking, singing a song. And so you've got these birds, and then you've got the footsteps behind me, and somebody starts humming. And it's joyous. It's just joyous. And I now find it very difficult just to take a photo, because I think I am missing out this 360 experience all around me and just looking at this little flower.
And it's so important because when we look at the data on social media platforms, most people, I think YouTube has 1 billion video views a day, and on social media platforms like your Facebook and your Instagram, over 60%. I think it's over 70% on YouTube and over 60% on Instagram. Most of the content that people engage in are actually videos up to 2 minutes. So as long as you don't kind of make a video over 2 minutes, you're going to have really strong engagement. And this is the future, and we have more conversions. So it's really important to think about how you can develop video strategies within your communications and your digital engagement strategies, because you have different types of content. So you have your written content that you would use maybe for your press releases or your blog posts or your op-eds, and then you have what I call news you can use, or news content, which would be generated from going on podcasts or wonderful video shows like Dollars or news programs. And then you would have your broader, more social media content, like your posts on your engaging posts on Twitter or on Facebook. And you have to figure out how video works in all of those places.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that is a really massive job that you're doing.
It is, but once you understand the context and you understand your stakeholders, and you don't want to rile everybody up so they can go down to their local town hall and protest and, have unfortunate things happen to them. Once you strike the balance, then that's where the creativity comes in. And
Right.
the creativity for me is a natural extension of myself. So and then it's executing that. And during COVID, that was really difficult. And that was one of the biggest human rights challenges at the time, that governments all around the world, not just in Southern Africa, were using lockdown laws to prevent the organization of groups, of all groups, of climate change groups, human rights groups, women's rights groups, whatever, Black Lives Matter, whatever the campaigning issue was. Governments around the world were using lockdown to limit protest.
Gosh, yes. It's when you look back on it like that, it's just really frightening, and you just see that connection. Because I really, I felt very locked down, and it was shocking that things were happening. I've done quite a few podcasts recently where people really, really were impacted by the death of Floyd
Mayweather.
Yeah.
No, that's Floyd Mayweather.
No.
Oh my goodness. Hold on.
There's two neurodiverse people in a room. Can they think of a name? No.
This is really bad. We're both dyspraxic, right? This is
Yeah.
This is really not disrespectful.
But basically, people at the time of lockdown were really affected by world news because they couldn't come together. And when people we had the murder of that poor woman in South London, and then we came together. There was, a vigil at Clapham Junction, at Clapham Common, at the bandstand. And what happens? It's shut down, and women felt really, really vulnerable. And I think that's just changed people in such a way, is feeling powerless like that, not being able to come together.
Right. And it's abusive.
Yeah.
Particularly what happened in London was abusive. And this is why we need to stay vigilant. And this is another reason why video is so important, because video doesn't have to be formalized with big cameras and crews. People are documenting their own experiences, and that's still video. And video was used as a way, particularly during, is it Evershed, the woman that was murdered actually by the policeman? She was murdered by the policeman.
Yeah.
And the women who were protesting, their protest was brutally suppressed by the police. And so those women that documented their experiences were able to use that video as evidence. Just like when George Floyd was murdered by another policeman, the 18-year-old girl who documented his final breath and the 8 minutes and 47 seconds. You see, I'm good at remembering numbers. The 8 minutes and 47 seconds at which the police had held his knee on his neck. She was, if she didn't take that video, I doubt very much would have come from the death of George Floyd, which is quite sad. But that's the power of video as well, and how it's used. And if you can coalesce that power and insert that into your digital strategies, then you'll be more successful. And it's not a quick fix. Communications takes a long time. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to monitor and evaluate as you go to see what's working and understanding your stakeholders and whether or not you need to change how you implement your strategy. But it's not a quick fix. It's not overnight. Just because you have one viral video doesn't mean you're successful. It means you were successful in with that particular story. Then you have to unpack the story, unpack your audience, and figure out why it was successful. And then you try and recreate that. But this is a long-term strategy. It's not quick. And I think for most organizations, and even when you work with kind of big individual brands or corporate companies, they think that it's easy. They don't realize comms is a business function. Communications is an engagement, is actually a business function. And if you don't understand it as a business function, because it raises the visibility of your organization, once you do that, you're able to fundraise or attract more sales into your pipeline, then you failed. Yeah, because you cannot have a business strategy without a communication strategy. And the same energy and money you put in your business, in your broader business strategy or organizational strategy or organizational goals, you actually have to put money in your communication strategy and your team. Otherwise, you won't be as successful. And you can see that with major companies, like if we go to business companies, you can see that with Apple. Apple are great at communications. And even if we look in, I guess you said, a medical field, during COVID, AstraZeneca had a horrific time with all the blood clots, and no one wanted to take the AstraZeneca vaccine because everyone was going to die from blood clots. If they had a proper communications team and they had thought about their business function, because even though they're providing a vaccine, it's still a business function, and selling it to countries around the world, they would have mitigated, they would have had a risk analysis, they would have mitigated the blood clots, and they would have been able to have a series of I say digital strategy to circumvent that fear. That doesn't mean it wouldn't have been there, but it means that they wouldn't have suffered as much brand damage as a result.
Yeah, and that's what's really exciting is when they listen to that team and they say, well, actually, this is a really big issue. Let's go back and let's solve this problem. Let's see exactly what this problem is. So when it's feeding back to the marketing team, to the management team, to the development team, that this blood clot is a really big issue for us because people are going to be, just not going to want to have this vaccine, and then go back and actually find out what the facts are. Can it be changed? Can it be improved? Are we ready to release this? And that's when it becomes full circle, because it's all very well, us making these great videos, really communicating, really having the strategy. But if that's not coming back to the marketing team, to the leadership team, you're going to keep making the same mistake, or you're going to be accused of cover up. Well, that's a great video because you've covered up the fact that there's a problem. And that's not a great place to be. It's really exciting when, you know, as creative people, you know, we just do that naturally, but we spend a lot of time researching things. But then to be listened to and to create change because there's feedback coming back from it, that's what makes it a really, really exciting proposition, to have that strategy really working and making change, not just with the audience, but with the people who are actually writing the scripts.
No, indeed. And it all comes back to a business function. If organizations understand communications as a business function instead of a send and go fetch, right, we need a press release, we need this, we need that. Most people don't really understand all of the skills you need to be successful in communications. And as a result of that, they diminish the work of people in that particular department. And you can see the difference between organizations that have a senior comms person on the executive management team that is respected and those that don't. AstraZeneca definitely didn't. They do now, but they hired a lot of people from WHO, the World Health Organization, but they do now, but they didn't before.
Wow, that's really interesting.
When you look at INGOs in the United Kingdom, like Save the Children, who I used to work for, Save the Children has a powerful, or when I was there, had a powerful media and communication team because they understood the business function. They understood they needed millions and millions of dollars to help these children all over the world. And we need to understand media. We need to understand these places, and we need to understand communications. And that's how they're able to raise so much money.
Wow, yeah.
It's really simple, but unfortunately, egos get in the way of people's business development strategies, which should include communications at the very top.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you with that. And I'd stop calling it creative process because that's only part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more intelligent than that, and it's much more understanding people than people realize we do. We don't just come up with a creative concept. It is context, it is audience, it is a proper strategy, and it's following it through and coming back with feedback and listening to, you know, is it working? Why isn't it working? Why is it working? There is so much more science to it than we think. Now, I mean, I love talking to you, Nadine. I love it. But I really am intrigued. I mean, you are a woman, you're a Black woman, you are a successful Black woman, and you work internationally. Now, I'm absolutely petrified of working internationally. And I was always wanted to, but I was always petrified of taking that job and going and doing it. And I've trained internationally, so that's kind of my big excitement to travel. But you are the expert at it, and that is your book. You got a book coming along, so I'm going to put the question up. Your book, look in the script.
Hold on, I can't answer till I remove this tissue. Okay, the tissue's gone now. All right,
Good,
cool.
good.
So yes, I collaborated on a book project with other women that have traveled because I'm very political and I'm very passionate. And I believe that women are underpaid, overworked, and underappreciated. And part of that is because we don't have the same cultural access often to old boys clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know the opportunities that are available or the strategies we need to employ to get paid, improve our salaries. Because over our lifetimes, many of us, we take time out to care for children, we take time out to look after other members of our families, including our parents. And over our lifetime, even as a professional woman, our earnings will be reduced because of the care responsibilities within our respective families. And I think that during our working years, we need to maximize our earning potential. So the book teaches women, whether they're single or whether they're members of families, traveling with husbands or as lone parents, how they can do that. It's really a blueprint of how you can do it through which countries might be more appropriate for you based on your particular profession, the types of salaries you can command in these countries. Of course, some of the social challenges, particularly when you're a woman from the West, we have a lot more liberties
Yeah.
than in the other places in the world. And so it's how you cope with these situations and how you build a network of other women that are doing the same thing. And I think during COVID, most of us had to pivot and we had to change the way in which we worked. And COVID changed the way I thought about almost everything. Or it made me, or during the lockdown, I should say, it made me become an essentialist.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that I focus on the things that are the most important. I don't really do any extraneous stuff anymore. And so everything that I do has to be of value. It has to add some kind of positive impact. And it's all about sharing experience. And what I experienced during lockdown was that I was able to tap into a global network of people, not just women, just across the board, men and women, and sometimes children, who actually helped me survive that experience, because at times it was really difficult for me. And I wanted to say, okay, the reason why I'm able to survive COVID, despite the fact that the budget line for my job disappeared from everyone's budgets. At that time, you had America with the former President Trump saying he's not giving any money to the UN anymore. You had Britain that's cut significant funding, and a few other European countries as well that did it much more quietly under the radar. And so when budgets are slashed, things get cut. My budget line, my job, my career disappeared overnight. And so I had to figure out how I was going to reposition myself within the industry to do that. And I had this whole network of women and some men that helped me do that. And I was like, wow, other women need to have this too. If I hadn't traveled abroad, I wouldn't have been able to. There's no way. I'm a journalist in the UK context is a job for the privileged. Most journalists are white. Most journalists are from not just middle class, upper middle class backgrounds. They're probably going to inherit, and they probably have some kind of trust fund. So being paid a livable wage, particularly in London, because our media empires are focused in London, when you have that kind of background, being a journalist is a much easier sell or career than if you come from a working class background from the north of England.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're underpaid. Journalists generally are underpaid. And I couldn't afford to be a poor journalist. That doesn't mean I'm rich, okay? But I like nice things. I like to do my hair. I like to go to the spa. I like to do my nails. Like, I'm a bit vain. So I need money to pay for the stuff that I like. And traveling was, of course, I'm passionate about travel. I've always been passionate about travel. And so I wanted to be able to afford to buy the things I wanted. I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to change the world as well and be able to impact. And so that's why I did it. And also my parents are Jamaican, and I'd been traveling a lot with them as a child. And I knew what the beach was when I was like 7 or 8. I knew what catching fish was and cooking it by the riverside. Like, I knew what these things were, and I wanted to experience them all. Because to be quite honest, I mean, I'm from Lewisham in South London, and I love Lewisham, like blue borough for life, but the world is bigger than Lewisham.
Well, I know that you've done some amazing stuff in Lewisham as well, so I'm going to add that in. Oh, well, I'm really, really looking forward. I have actually, one can pre-book this, and it's going to be in the link in the comments, because this video is going to live on YouTube. Yay! And on LinkedIn. And
I'm eternal.
So there will be a link to flipping the script. I have already signed up for it. I'm really looking forward to it, because this is just so important. This is really important for women to have the confidence to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out to other women. That's the number one thing. It's something I'm learning every day, how to do it, how to reach out to people and say, I can't do everything myself. I need a bit of support. And I think we're at a really exciting time now where, women are beginning to feel much more confident being themselves. When I travel to the Middle East and teach in the Middle East, I no longer feel self-conscious because I wear things that make me feel comfortable, so I don't feel and I'm comfortable with wearing things that make me feel comfortable, not being an object, not being objectified. So that's really different, because I used to be like, well, I'm just going to wear what I wear and stuff everyone. And I kind of have learned so much through traveling, through working in different places, because that's different from being on holiday. When you're working, you're really, really getting to know people. I was so excited to be working. You've worked at Al Jazeera as permanent staff. I've just trained there. And there'll be people in the room. One of the things I do is you've got to do an infographic about your life story. And, at the end of the day too, everyone does this infographic. What they actually do is they get somebody to draw it for them. So they've actually got to brief someone. And then they stand up with their chart and they say, this is my life story. And somebody stood up and they said, this is my life story. And it starts here because I was born in Yemen. And my father was a camel farmer. And as a child, we moved to the Sahara and we lived in the Sahara. And he started talking about the sky and the stars. The whole room was completely his. We were his. And then the next person stood up and they said, well, this is me. And I was born here. And I went to Malaysia to study. When I was in Malaysia, I used to drive speedboats. And there's all these people coming from all these amazing countries. I have no experience of meeting these people before. And Sudan, Egypt, and you're working with them and you're actually sitting down with a cup of tea and having a conversation. And, what's similar, what's dissimilar? What are our similarities as human beings? What are our values that we all agree on? And that's so powerful. And then you start having a laugh with them. And you think, this is so great, because you're male, I'm female, we're different parts of the world, but you know what, we can share a joke and we can connect as people and we can learn from each other, which is really, really exciting. So do you have a life lesson, just a little life lesson to share with us?
Bet on yourself. Jim Rohn says, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. You attract what you are. You need to work on developing any area of yourself that you might think needs a bit of work. And I don't mean necessarily your exterior. It could be an area of interest you have, something that will develop your storytelling ability, or something that will develop your data visualization ability. Whatever it is, work on yourself. Because if you die, your job will advertise your position within 48 hours, okay? And they'll keep it moving. So you have to keep yourself moving. You have to bet on yourself. And that's one of the greatest things that's powered me through my career, but definitely during COVID. The reason I survived COVID, despite the fact my budget lines disappeared, was because I bet on myself throughout. I was able to travel abroad and earn enough money so that I had, well, people still earn and don't necessarily save, but I had a cushion, and that's the cushion that held me until I figured it all out. Mm-hmm. So I would say bet on yourself and plan for your futures. Wow. Especially women.
Yes.
Especially women.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Thank you so much, Nadine. Thank you so much. I mean, all the way from Jamaica. I can't believe it's such a great line. I know you had to go to a bar to get the line, but what a fantastic line. And it's just always so exciting to talk with you, Nadine.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for the insights. Really, really great. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Anyone who is watching this on YouTube, if you like it, click below and follow, and keep betting on yourself. Thank you. Right, I'm going to play my end titles and we will go.